Any comments from the floor? Consider an act on request for adjustments to a relief from specific charges imposed by the district.
Okay.
Consent agenda. Any items to be removed for further discussion?
Yes, on item 5, I've got a few items.
Okay. Any others? If not, do we have a motion to approve all but item 5?
So moved.
In a second. All in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. Item 5, review and act on the financial reports and disbursements of October 2022.
So first observation is on page 5, the 1-month activity for the income statement. Because the rates, the sewer rates went up that we pay San Jacinto, and we don't get the revenue increase until the first of the calendar year. You can see what happens. On the bulk sewer purchases, we're 140,000 versus 129 in revenue, so we're at 108.7%. So we're very closely tied to that sewer rate. Second item is on page 8. This is a question that it keeps slipping my mind, but the bonds that we sold to, for this thing we're going to talk about today, $6,550,000, that needs to be added to our balance sheet, and it hasn't been done. So I didn't know if you were waiting for the audit, because it looks like you allow the auditors to make the bond adjustments.
Page 10 shows the bond escrow with Bank of New York and grant funds.
Yeah, I get that. I'm talking about page 8,
Yeah.
the debt itself. We owe $6,550,000 to the state of, or to the Texas Water Development Board.
Maybe those come after the audit, but that's pretty.
Yeah, so
Okay.
when does the audit start, by the way?
It started, it's under.
Okay. So,
Just get that number sooner if you want.
right, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
And the same with the bonds payable to SDRA and the regular bonds payable. If those can be adjusted at the same time, that'd be great. Thank you. Page 10. So the bond escrow account, the $6,299,000, which is at the state, shouldn't that be earning interest?
I don't know that Bank of New York.
They wanted us to choose a fund and satisfying that we can have them do that. If we wanted to.
When choose a fund, what do you mean?
They have a couple of options. At the time, they were so small, it was insignificant. But I'm sure now we can check back and see if we want to remove it someplace. Yeah.
Well, I mean, regardless of what the, whatever rate they're paying on a $6 million number, it's going to be a sizable amount. And it's going to be there for a while. I would suggest we get on that yesterday. I mean, I hope they make it retroactive.
Or
So when they
The
got,
bond funds, to when they receive the funds.
well, this is a bit of a unique scenario where you have the bank acting as a long-term escrow agent. They're not necessarily a typical depository bank for the district. Normally they handle closings and the funds go in, the funds go out. As far as the actual investment, I guess they've offered up a couple of minor choices, but there's not really, I mean, the point is to preserve capital.
I get that. But it's very easy to preserve capital and put it in an interest-bearing account.
Depends on where it's going though, because you've got collateral, then you have collateral security issues wherever it goes.
I would suggest if they've made some offers to us that we seriously sit down and look at that with
Yeah.
those types of questions in mind.
Yeah.
And because, as I say, over time, it's going to be a big number, or could be a big number.
Does this Texas Water Board allow us to collect interest on an interest-free loan? I thought there was some discussion about
Well,
what you can and can't do with
Yeah,
that.
it's not necessarily, I don't know anything specifically from the Texas development. But I can try to check that, but I thought our discussion was more revolved around the federal arbitrage and yield restriction requirements for tax exempt ones, that you can't earn a really rate on the funds that you obtain for tax exempt debt than what you're paying out in interest. So this being a very unique situation where we have zero interest that we're paying out. So anything we generate is going to be arbitrage that would need to be paid to the IRS. So, we have to put it in, we have to put it in something, just with the understanding that whatever that amount is, that's most likely going to have to go to the IRS under the yield restriction and arbitrage requirements.
Okay.
So
So you think this scenario would require reimbursement or forfeiture of that interest earnings? So what do we gain?
you don't, and that's why I'm saying it, we'll have, that we'll have to go into something. I mean, you can't go and artificially restrict your yields. You're not going to have to pay the IRS, but we have to make sure that wherever it goes, it's very conservative, is in compliance with the Texas Public Funds Investment Act, that it doesn't generate any additional requirements in terms of collateralizing, having a collateral security agreement where you have to put collateral at a third-party institution in case that institution goes bankrupt, all the stuff that's in your investment policy. So that's what we'll have to make sure of, that wherever it is placed, that it doesn't create any of those issues, or to the extent that it does create them, that those requirements are complied with.
So how did we answer where they wanted us to go with it?
I don't know that, have you given them any direction on where to put it at this point?
No, I told them that we weren't interested at this time.
Yeah.
That we had three options and I had them printed them out, and
Yeah.
I was just concerned at some of the vehicles. I didn't really know if it was a good idea.
Yeah.
I
Well,
can get them again.
yeah, we'll have to look into that some more and make sure that whatever is done, that it's compliant with the Texas Public Funds Investment. Because Bank of New York, that's who was our closing. I mean, they do closings all over the place, not just here. So they're not going to be necessarily zeroed in on that. And frankly, where we typically deal with them is not in being a long-term holder of district funds. Usually the function that they serve is to go and close on bonds. So they receive funds in maybe the night before or the morning of, and then they turn around and are wiring funds out that day or maybe a couple of days later. They're not serving in this kind of long-term role. So we'll have to work our way through that.
Okay.
Anything else, Paul?
No, so
Okay. Then do we have a motion to approve number 5?
So
And a second?
second.
Okay, all in favor, aye? Opposed, nay? Regular agenda. Number 8, the San Jac report.
Hi, how are y'all doing tonight?
Good.
Our report begins on page 15 with our monthly operating reports. If you have any questions on those reports, I'll be happy to answer them. If not, we have Dan here who will talk about our wastewater strategic plan. And then Ed will cover the other items.
Any questions on the operating reports before I go?
Yeah, I do have a couple of questions. And it's on page 29, and specifically the reuse water section there. To what degree is the reuse water treated, and how do the rates there compare to just the general user, commercial or residential?
The wastewater that is sent to Club Corp Panther Trails.
Yeah.
That is coming out of the treatment plant, so it's gone through the same treatment process that of the water that we discharge into the streams.
Okay.
The rate is very low. It does not cover the cost, but they were not willing. We've tried to talk to them about raising the rates and they've been unwilling. And then what Southern Montgomery County MUD's water is the same. It comes out of their treatment plant after the treatment process. What they charge their customers, I have no idea.
Okay.
It's not, we have no jurisdiction, no control on that.
Okay, so why does Club Corps get to dictate what rate they pay?
That was done before that was done a long, long time ago, if I remember correctly. And long before the groundwater reduction plan, because normally under groundwater reduction plan, we could claim credit for that recycled water and earn some advanced credit with Lone Star District back in the early days. But we've tried several times, my understanding, not recently, to negotiate different deals, and they've been unwilling. My understanding, they've kind of talked like, okay, if you're going to raise rates, we'll just go back to groundwater. And right now, it's better that they stay on recycled water.
Right. Okay. Okay. That answers my question. Thank you.
So update wastewater strategic plan. About half of this packet is meeting summaries, minutes from progress meetings, stakeholder meetings. I wasn't going to touch on any of those unless y'all had specific questions. But you should have two handouts from tonight. First one I've touched on is the proposed project schedule. We've had some recent changes in this, so I wanted to bring everybody up to speed on where we're the path forward between now and essentially March. And I guess the first thing is we have talked about, you've probably seen notices, email about a November 29th All MUD Director wastewater strategic plan recap. We are canceling that and rescheduling it to early January. Reason being is from the November 2nd stakeholder meeting, we got a lot of feedback from the stakeholders on how to rework or some of the financial charts and tables. And we want to have an opportunity to do that. So we would be able, and we won't be able to present that at the November 29th meeting that we had scheduled. So we feel a lot of the MUD directors are going to want to see that piece of it, which really wouldn't be ready for that meeting. So we feel a more efficient, effective All MUD Director recap of where we're at would be in the early January timeframe after we make those financial updates, present it to the stakeholders on December 13th, and then be able to present that to all MUD directors early January. So you will hear from Jim or Shelley, a few dates and send it around kind of, hey, what works for you again, similar to like we did the 29th. So there'll be more to come on that, but we want to state that we are going to postpone it just for those reasons. Moving forward, we want to make sure we're giving all the directors ample time and opportunities to discuss the alternatives and path forward. We acknowledge that a lot of the MUDs are going to be canceling their December meeting. So we know that opportunity might not be there, but we will be able to utilize the January MUD meeting for general discussion and then come back to the individual MUDs in February to essentially take a vote or essentially direct your trustee how to vote in March on the final decision of path forward for phase 2, what alternative regarding the wastewater strategic plan. So we would be asking for MUD's vote February, then it would go back because it started at the trustees, go back to the trustees in March for final concurrence on path forward. So this is the current road path plan that we have. Is there any questions on that? I'll touch on this briefly too, is the second handout, should look like this, it's 8 or 9 pages. What this is through the stakeholder discussion on November 2nd. We have narrowed down the number of alternatives from 9 to 4. the 4 remaining alternatives that we're continuing further investigation and evaluation of. And this summarizes what those 4 are. 2 common things I do want to point out is all 4 of these alternatives that remain utilize the membrane bioreactor NBR treatment technology. At both plants 1 and plants 2. The second common factor is all 4 of them show the need for additional land acquisition east of wastewater treatment facility number 1 towards Golden Road for new infrastructure that would be constructed there. And I want to be, take your time into consideration, but do you want me to go through this in more detail and talk about the 4 remaining ones? Or Paul, I don't know if you had anything to add from the stakeholder meeting too.
No, I'll just ask you to talk about the NBR some more, because I ran into our sometime participant, Dr. Shelley, and she immediately says, well, I'm sorry, that NBR costs too much. And I said, well, the latest discussion refutes that. So would you explain to this board what the original comparison was and what the revised comparisons are?
Yeah, absolutely. So one reason we landed on the NBR with the stakeholders is because of cost. And working with our consultant, Friesen Nichols, they were comparing the costs of our conventional treatment technologies versus the NBR, which the NBR is now showing a lower cost than what we are currently utilizing conventionally for treatment. In the past, I think there was some statements on NBR is going to cost more, but what our consultant was comparing to was a previous study they did for another city who was using conventional treatment, but it was a different type of conventional treatment. It was called sequence and batch reactors. So they were comparing it to something that is essentially not comparable to what we currently have. So once they finally dug into what our current O&M expenses, current infrastructure for conventional treatment versus this NBR option, the NBR long-term total cost of ownership is lower than what we're doing immediately or doing currently. One other thing is we would be able to relook at UV disinfection with using the NBR treatment, which would pull us away from a lot of the chemical cost on chlorine and et cetera that we've seen extraordinary cost increases on recently. So there's a significant cost savings there. Other and non-cost factors we've talked about is, a high quality of effluent for taking future permitting restrictions, requirements into consideration, looking at odor control, utilizing the NBR, improving on that. So, yeah, Paul, does that answer your question, kind of how we arrived at, let's cross off all the conventional ones and go to NBR?
The danger is that when people don't attend all the sessions and they only get half, the first part of the story, then they're in the lurch and start disseminating information that's not currently correct. So I just wanted to make that distinction.
No, and I agree. And, we try to come to y'all digital mud meetings and present like I am today, but we do feel that January meeting for all my directors come and hear a recap from beginning to January is going to be a big help to and help everybody understand and move forward to make a decision. I'd be happy to answer any questions or go into more detail.
Any questions or further discussion?
Has that January date been established yet?
It has not, I think, a couple of days. I was
It's
thinking
definitely gonna be before.
before the stakeholder meeting.
Oh, yeah, and that's on January the 10th. So Shelley's gonna send out the end of this week some options. And it will probably be after hours,
Yes.
after 5 PM to try to encourage as much participation as we can.
Yeah, I think that's what we were looking at, like that Tuesday, Wednesday, or the 4th.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you.
let me know if you have anything else.
Okay.
if you might go ahead and move to the Bear Branch topic number.
Do you want, Ed, want to give the?
Oh,
I can wait. If you
No,
want.
no, and I'm sorry, I was thinking we were at the end of that agenda item.
So mine are real quick, the update on the infrastructure funding, we're still waiting on Congress to act. They have not considered the legislation that has the community project funding projects in it. Bear Branch Dam concrete repairs, that is complete. We are now in the warranty period. And then the Bear Branch Dam low flow vault project that we talked about during the budget period. We've got the documents ready to go out for bids, and then we've also found out that the hatch that we're proposing has a 15-week delivery schedule, and so we're gonna buy it free. It's like $2,500. Get it on order while we're seeking bids so that we can have we can save a month and a half. So that's it.
Okay, well, thank you, Ed. Any questions for Ed? Okay. Okay, Jim, you want to move to number
Yeah, I
12
was
then?
going to recommend we move to number 12. Donnie is here with LJA. And see if we can work our way through that.
Okay. Number 12 is receive update regarding status of Bear Branch, Panther Branch, and Research Forest Drive Drainage Improvement Project and Professional Service Agreement relative to the same. Authorize any action in connection therewith, including but not limited to approval of professional services agreement with LJA Engineering Incorporated.
And first of all, let me say that I feel very bad about the emails you kept getting from me telling you when these documents would be delivered to you, when they would be available. I feel very bad about that. It just, we were doing the best we could, but a lot of moving parts and just, I think we finally got there. We finally got there. So I think we're prepared to make a recommendation and certainly answer your questions and get feedback from you. But I think we've got the schedule worked out, the budget worked out, and the professional services agreement to our satisfaction and LJA's, and would welcome your feedback and comments.
Okay.
And Brian, I think it's been reviewed by legal as well.
Okay, we'll open it up to any questions. First of all, before we move further, Paul, anything?
I've got several comments, so I'd just ask the other directors if they have questions to go ahead and ask their questions, so I don't duplicate anything.
Then I'm going to start because I've got four that I'd like clarification. First one's on Article 2, 2.2, where it says either party shall have the right to terminate any work order for cause, and district shall have the right to terminate any work order for convenience. Can you give us an example of what could possibly happen there that would trigger that?
One could be that the project manager that they have assigned to the project leaves the firm and they don't have a comparable, competent project manager to step into his footsteps. Would be one option. Another would be if they are significantly behind schedule and can't make it up. Or if there's a professional difference of opinion where something happens on their side, or we ask them to do something on their side and they say no, they would have the right to cancel. And this is typical for most professional services agreements where some contracts say 7 days notice, some say 30 days notice.
Okay.
So it rarely happens. For example, you all could have a complete change of directors at the next election and stop the project.
Yeah.
And that would be a cause to cancel the contract.
Okay. I just want to get a flavor for what
Seen that
possible. Yeah. Okay. The next question that I have is on Article 5, 5.1, where the district shall, and this is kind of in the middle of that article, district shall at all reasonable times have access to such records for the purpose of inspecting, auditing, verifying, or copying the same or making extracts therefrom. And we had talked about, I think at the November 3rd meeting, about the reporting. And I don't see any place in here where it says that we're going to have monthly reports or quarterly reports or how we're going
That's
to
in the
determine that.
services.
Or was it?
And they
okay, I
are-
missed it.
They are providing reports to us that we would supply to you all for status. But then LJA is also responsible for providing the outlay reports and the reporting to the Water Development Board.
Okay,
I believe that's on a quarterly basis.
okay, okay. And then on Article 6, 6.1. Studies, plans, reports, drawings, specifications, cost estimates, software computations, and other information and documents prepared by consultant, its consultants, contractors, and or suppliers in connection with services or any project for district are and shall remain district's property upon creation, collectively work product. Does this include the previous modeling? I mean, over the last couple of years, Donnie's given us some presentations with models of how this water flows in this area. Does it include this, or is that something that we already own, or?
I would think only what is germane to this contract and what.
So that's a separate piece then.
Yes,
Okay,
that's paid for separately.
that's what I thought. Okay, the next I have is on Article 8 and 8.2. Consultant agrees to assign district a warranty or guarantee of any subconsultant, subcontractor, supplier, or manufacturer of items of services, supplies, machinery, equipment, materials, or products provided by consultant hereunder and cooperate and assist district in district's enforcement thereof. Consultant's responsibility with respect to thereto is limited to such assignments. Who's responsible for the corrective work in case a subcontractor goes out of business?
Subcontractor, according to them, LJA is responsible. If it's
Okay.
related to construction, then it'd be the prime contractor. And then between LJA and SJRA, we would be enforcing the prime contractor to make it right.
Okay, so then Donnie, you'd have to find somebody to replace the one that went out of business. Okay. And then the final one that I have is Article 19, dispute resolution. Senior representative consultant shall meet with the general manager of district at a mutually agreed upon time and place not later than 45 days after such a dispute arises to attempt to resolve such a dispute. And here, just clarification, would that be Jim or Ed or both, or how do
Would be both.
both?
In reality, yes, it
Yeah.
would be both.
Okay. Yeah, it just says general manager, so I just want to clarify who's going to be involved if hopefully that doesn't come up, but just in case.
Right.
Okay. That's all I've got. So, Paul?
Anybody else? Yeah, I have some, just some general questions to start with. I read through this agreement and we know that the State Water Board has some demands and requirements also. What if there are superior demands or even conflicting demands from the Water Board as compared to what's in this proposed contract? Which prevails?
Thought we worked in the requirements that were set out by the Water Development Board into the contract.
I couldn't tell you what all the specifics were, but I know there were some.
Under
In fact,
Article 20.
Article 20, we put all that in there
Okay,
to address what the Water Development Board
All right.
required.
just assume they're taken care of then. I didn't read a retainage rate in this proposed contract. Are you proposing one? And if so, what is it?
On the engineering, it's. My mind is going to the construction side. That's 5%.
Advantage on engineering.
Yeah.
Typically, we don't do it.
But they're also, there are certain deliverables that they're required to provide. And they don't, and it's time and material up until delivery.
So we retain the payment until we get the deliverable.
Correct.
That's the
That's the
retainage.
retainage.
Okay, so engineering is zero is what you're saying.
Then I also said that we can only bill for what we've done, for what we've done.
Correct.
That's
Right. And then there was some discussion in here about individual work orders. And I guess I was coming away with the question of, is each work order severable, and does it become its own separate issue? Or how does that work?
Well, for example, work order would be issued to initiate survey work. Might be a separate work order to initiate the modeling work, and then preliminary engineering, and it would identify the various tasks under preliminary engineering that include the modeling, the report. So it's severable, but there's not going to be very many work orders.
So this work order 1, is that going to be it for this first, all the way through?
Yeah, if you look on section 1.1, it deals with the separate work order. Each work order shall constitute a separate independent agreement between the consultant and the district in the form attached to the overall agreement. So these terms kind of attached to each individual work order.
I repeat, so is this work order 1 taking us all the way through, September of 23?
Just 1 second.
And the cost schedule that's attached, $1 million? $1 million.
The work order would cover all the tasks that are in your packet. So task 1101, project management, task 1102, existing condition modeling.
Okay, I guess I don't understand, or I'm not making myself clear, or maybe both. Are we going to issue a work order for each one of these line items on this thing?
No,
Okay,
we
I didn't
would
think
issue
so.
a work order for work order 1. Includes several different tasks that are broken down into each of those line items.
correct. Okay,
In plain speak, work order 1 will take us through the point to verify if the preliminary estimates on what we
Yes.
thought the hydraulic modeling would reduce the water surface elevation. It's going to prove up either those estimates were valid or not. That'll get it. I mean, that, to me, that's work order number 1. We'll get us, we'll have a new hydraulic model for the drainage system, starting with Bear Branch Reservoir all the way down to Spring Creek. And then we'll also be able to firm up if the preliminary estimates on lowering the water surface elevation with the detention and the stream improvements are valid.
it also looks like we're going to get some current cost estimates as well
Correct.
on the construction portion of it. Okay. I wasn't as organized as Roland here, so bear with me. And I think also, getting back to this question of the state water board having, I think, ownership of some of these things as well. They're not getting ownership. Stays with the district. All right.
Have no use for it.
Page 10, insurance. Are these limits, the 2 million plus the 5 million, are they considered the norm in the industry, or is this a special for this project, or what?
It's a little special to this project. Brian and I talked about them and increased the professional liability limits. They were 1 and 2, and we increased it to 5 and 5. SJRA has, in its recent history, like during the GRP, we had professional liability limits up to as high as 10 because of the size of the projects and the order of magnitude, potential costs associated with them. And so we've adjusted professional liability insurance because at this stage, that's all that's being considered for contracting. Now, we may have different limits when we go to construction.
Okay. That's a distinction I wanted to get to.
Yes.
Do we wait until work order number 2 to make this demand? Because there was several references in here to making sure that we get copies of all these insurance policies, and if they change, we get revisions
Right.
immediately. And
Right.
et cetera, et cetera.
We will change based on, like, the next work order would probably be to go to design phase services, if it proves to be feasible to move forward. So that would have its own insurance limits, different contract, its own limits. When we go to construction, it would be a construction contract with its own limits.
Okay. So based on what we're looking at this point, both of you feel comfortable with the revised upward limits?
As increased, because it's both professional liability and the umbrella was increased from 1 to 5.
Okay, so I didn't see these as normal, but I'm not current either, so I don't know. Okay. And then on subsection E on the following page, it talks about getting copies of these certificates. I presume we do not have those at this point.
Correct.
And is MUD 67 and indemnity when they're talking about F here?
They will be along with SJRA.
Okay, and that's true. So much fun. Governing law, page 15, Article 18. Texas Development Water Board does not have a set of their own laws, governing law. Is that correct? Okay, so we're back to the state of Texas. Okay, got it. These on page, well, the attachment A, the raw salary multipliers. I didn't see how they came into effect, and frankly, when I looked at this cost schedule and I saw all those rates across the top, I said, where in the world did those come from? Because I was trying to relate it back to this multiplier issue, and I don't know what the bases are, and you've got way more than 3 different permutations up top.
So we've allowed a maximum of a multiplier of 3.2 against their hourly rate. Now, Donnie, the numbers at the top of the spreadsheet, are those your hourly rate?
That's good. Yeah, that's a loaded number.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is there's more than 3. Or I guess I can't say that because I don't know what the bases are.
Right. So you take that number divided by 3.2, and that's.
Well, it shouldn't be 3.2 in all cases. I mean, there's clerks and everything else down there.
Well, based on what's shown here in attachment A, there are some definitions of where you apply the 3.2 versus a 2.86 versus a 2.75.
I guess all I'm saying is, as I sit here and look at attachment A and look at this, I do not have the ability to check any of this. So who has checked this? Who has verified these calculations? Let me just put it that way.
I've relied on Donnie to say, these are the rates for these people and they comply with the 3.2. Because that's all we're paying.
And I know Donnie, I love Donnie, but I just can't go that far. I'm sorry. I need to verify.
Okay. We can ask for an hourly rate sheet to go with this.
Am I being obnoxious or what?
Being thorough, yeah. Like Alan said, just being thorough, make sure.
Let me take it, because I don't have it memorized. Let me take a look at it real quick.
See all the numbers across the top.
You're a little small, but yeah.
Yeah, they're small.
I would tell you they're reasonably in line with what the other consultants are charging. In fact, we have one consultant that falls in a principal category. Where LJA is showing a $320 an hour. They were $450 an hour. So these are very reasonable numbers. that. From what you've seen.
You're one.
Came out of that not too long ago.
Yeah.
Let me offer maybe a compromise. We'd like to get this executed today if possible, that we will take this information, get the details from Donnie, do an internal check. And if we find an error, I'm assuming Donnie's willing to go back and relabel
Yeah,
it.
we have an hourly rate sheet that we have with the mud as well. I mean, we use, those rates in our hourly bill for y'all as well. And so, we can go back and make sure and show you.
I'll accept that compromise. Thank you.
Let me offer this. Because of the way the Professional Procurement Act is, we can't price this with anybody else unless you terminate negotiation with LJA. So all we have is industry knowledge to rely on.
I'm not taking exception to that. What I'm asking for is,
You want to see the
It's the
calculation.
multiplier
the
arithmetic.
Base rate times the,
Exactly.
make sure there's not typos or whatever. So,
Exactly.
Yeah, they have the base sheet and then,
in total, based on the data that's presented, it's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not arguing that.
Yeah.
But it, all right.
Yep.
All right. So the next issue, or the next question I have is, what differentiates owner-directed services from the general scope of services?
It would be based on, so there are some items I think described in the scope that might fall under owner-directed services. So for one would be if we were to ask him, well, first one out of the chute on owner-directed services is the Bear Branch Dam spillway analysis as to design or a model a different configuration of the spillway. That's not part of the basic scope. So we would ask him to provide us a proposal for it. And we would bring it to you all for approval. And then that would be a change order to the project scope.
Let's take the largest item on here as an example. It's a couple items from the bottom. It says it's 1105.6. It's acquired LiDAR data for entire limits of project, $130,000. And that appears to be a procurement of some kind.
Yes,
Okay, why would that be owner directed?
because right now it's not it's not part of the base scope. And it still has to be proved up to us that we need it to do the modeling effort.
Do you anticipate, Jim, do you anticipate wanting or needing that or that particular line item for $130,000?
At this point, I don't know.
So these are options, our options.
Correct.
Which we may or may not exercise, depending
And
on,
if they can come and prove to us that there is a need for it to make the model more accurate
okay,
or more beneficial.
Be a supplement to the survey.
Yes. Same with number 7, additional survey or acquire survey of additional cross sections. This would be more than the 100 that are already built into the base scope.
okay. All right, understand that now, thank you. Guess the last one I had on this section was, let's see, attachment A again, and the expenses and travel expenses to and from outside Harris and Montgomery County. I mean, do we anticipate any of that?
We're not.
Did we anticipate anything there, Donnie?
No, sir, no, I didn't think anything would be outside Harrison or Montgomery.
All right,
That's on most consultant contracts, that is a provision. So like if for some reason they're directed to go to Austin and deal with the water development board,
okay, got it.
they get paid their mileage.
Sure, no, got it. Okay,
Okay. Anyone else have any questions, any discussion? If not, are we ready to move forward? And if so, then
When we have another package here, did anybody talk about that?
That's just our cover email and
What will work?
scope. And that spreadsheet you were looking at
Yes.
identifies is the breakdown of what's in that written scope.
Okay. Well, if I might then just continue, on the second package, on the work order number 1, this would be paragraph, or task 1101,
Mhm.
and then it's 4B, I guess. There's monthly in-person project update meetings with district as well as appropriate team members. I would assume that would be at the board of directors meetings at this meeting.
Not necessarily, because it might take more than, it might be an hour-long meeting, 2-hour-long meeting to go over some of the parameters that they need to verify, or they want to talk about alternatives.
Well, let me rephrase the question. Would it be normal that it would be at the board of directors meeting, that report?
I'll be honest, I don't know, because this is the first one we have done like this for you all.
What number are you looking at again?
I'm on, it's page 3 of 11,
Top of page 311,
Got it.
and it's right, it's
item
up,
B.
item B at the top. Monthly in person.
This is something that we always have in our project management scope, so that we can meet with a consultant outside of a board meeting to talk through specifics on the project.
Yeah, I would say this is not describing a board meeting. This would be a staff consultant meeting that we would report to you what findings or important information would come out of this.
I didn't want to get another meeting. All right, thank you.
I'm glad to clarify that.
Okay, next question would be on number 5, document control. It says the consultant will assist. Who's responsible?
Will assist in planning, execution, filing, and retrieval of all project documentation. So we have a project documentation software that we use. And so they are responsible for using that and uploading their documents to this software. And so where it says execution and filing and retrieval of project documents, if we post something on that software, they can retrieve it without having to drive out here or us having to email it. And
Is San Jacinto River Authority responsible?
yes, we're ensuring that they
Okay.
do their project management.
Got it, thank you. Page 4 of 11. Quarterly, Woodlands, Texas Water Development Board. Quarterly reports, the final line of that paragraph with it says draft project district or TWDB shall submit, I think that should be San Jacinto River Authority, is that correct?
Yes. Or
Okay.
it should say SRA or LJA.
All right, let's add LJA and then cross out TWDB and insert San Jacinto. And there's several references to other sponsors, and I wholeheartedly agree that they should be involved in this. On page 7 of 11, says incorporate contracts or comments from the district, SRA, other sponsors, and there's several of those. And it goes on to the next page where there's 2 or 3 references to that as well. What's envisioned with that clause in there regarding their participation?
Actually, we were going to ask you all to say, how would you like communication to occur with your other funding partners? Do you want to be responsible for providing that communication, or would you like SRA? Because right now it's not supposed to be in their scope, LJA's scope.
I personally don't think we should generate any additional reports. I think we should use whatever report we have and, on a summary basis, we should use that as the basis to report.
And
The
we,
same document for all participants.
correct.
Yes.
And the idea was that we would just notify them at their various board meetings. Here is the documentation, the recent documentation we've received, or recent status report we've received from the consultant.
But in some cases, you're asking for comments,
At some point,
right?
they're going
Reports, the final reports or semi-final
to, or
reports.
they may want to hear what the final recommendations are.
Right.
So they paid a
Sure.
certain amount of money in.
Page 10 of 11 on number 4. If that range of estimates of minus 30% plus 50% is the level of confidence we're going to have in our construction number at the end, that's not much. That's such a huge.
It's a big swing. Coming into the feasibility, or at the end of the feasibility report, because that's still conceptual, I can see that this is normal what we get from all of our consultants. It's not until you get into design phase that you can get it narrowed down to plus or minus 10%. But this is pretty normal for conceptual study. This is probably very similar to what's going on with the wastewater strategic plan and the
I
stakeholder.
thought I heard that number once before.
And this is, this class 4 estimate, this is based on the national standard of estimating.
That's all I have.
Again, any other questions? And if not, move forward and with a motion to approve the contract.
And work order number 1 as revised.
That's right.
And the typo, yeah.
Okay. Do we have such motion?
So
And a second. Second. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, nay? We're done there.
Now I need the question they're going to ask next. When can you start?
Yesterday.
I need to have my surveyors scheduled, to get out there. There's some things probably right after that.
Do we need TWD approval on execute contract operation?
We've been told not.
Okay.
We need to co-execute this agreement now.
There's signature pages. for that.
I got them. They're only asking for 2 signatures.
You have one already signed by your group or two?
Yes.
Do you want to use those? So,
Yeah.
and just make a
Well,
note on
We
the,
still got to make some edits, but those are internal pages that are not signature.
Yeah. bring them up.
He's got different. You have 3 sets?
Yeah, he's,
Nice to.
well, but I would utilize those. Maybe it's not.
Those are executed by LJ. Yeah. They're on the same page. The 6 pages are. What words on the same page. I think they are.
The cover sheet on the scope is,
Well, just go ahead and do what you're doing and we'll get yours and let him take them back. Yeah. Trying to be more efficient, and I think I'm making it more complicated.
And we'll expect those insurance certificates tomorrow.
electronic. You want web? We need web signatures.
Okay.
Sorry.
We have recycle bin upstairs.
Okay.
Attorney's report.
Yeah, number 9, attorney's report, Brian.
Thank you all.
Let's see.
Thank you.
No general items to cover under 9 today.
Okay. Number 10, status of proposed annexation of 9.811 acres into the district and authorize any action in connection therewith.
A letter from the city staff that we've been deemed administratively complete. It doesn't come on the council agenda yet, but it's administratively complete. So they're moving slow these days, but that's not par for the course.
Okay, so nothing there.
You want me to date these today?
Yes.
Number 11, authorize attorney to file imminent domain report with the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts prior to February 1, 2023, pursuant to section 2206.154 Texas Government Code.
That's a standard administrative item we have each year. Having gone into more detail for boards like y'all that have seen this before. So
Okay.
So moved.
And a second. All in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. Number 13, receive information on merchant services, service fees, and consider the option of passing on a portion of the fee to customers.
I'll make a brief introduction. This is a carryover from the trustee meeting. Paul had actually asked for some information from staff regarding the merchant services collectively with all the MUDs, and the number is big. It's 500,000 or more. And so the question came up, would it be appropriate to look at the different electronic
Is there work?
platforms and charges and consider passing some of that expense back to the customers using those? And I think the trustees thought it was worth looking into, appointed the Finance Audit Committee to get with staff and maybe bring back a couple of options for them to consider. But just keep in mind, whatever we come up with would need to be uniform between the 10 MUDs. We couldn't have a mixed bag of options that were regarding customer payment charges. So I think with that brief introduction, Paul, I'll let you make some comments.
No, thank you. Maureen did provide some data. It's about 6 or 7 different categories, if you can believe that, of payment methods. And the percentages to process those payments range anywhere from less than 1% in several cases to 2% in the most heavily used segment. That's like 428,000 of the total of over 550,000. So, and then there's another 2% section, and then one that's even 4.25%. So it seems to me that when you don't have 100% of the base of the taxpayers using that system, then what you have is whatever is not using it is subsidizing those that are using it. And that's my only concern, is equitability, and how do we, is that enough of an issue? Someone raised the question, well, how much is it costing my MUD? And so we're going to have to break that down by MUD, and somebody who has, an insignificant participation by dollars, they say, hey, I'm not interested, and they'll probably kill the whole thing. But anyway, so it's just something that has been, that we have discussed actually for years, and as time has gone on, the number has grown. Percentages have gone up from the people that are processing these things. And I think the use is probably growing a little bit because people like their points and they like their mileage, right? And as long as somebody else is going to help pay for it, why not? But anyway, that's where we are.
That's where we are. Yep. And it's, the technology has served us well. It's kept our workload down with processing checks and walk-in customers, but it's a big number that deserves to be vetted and see and you're seeing other utility companies and others that are starting to pass some of that expense back to the customers. So I think it's appropriate to look at it.
I think we should look at it.
Okay.
So no action needs to be taken. We're just receiving information.
Correct.
Okay, number 14, Jim?
I'm going to move quickly through several topics here, and then I can circle back to answer any questions you might have. Arthur Breederhoff attended the trustee meeting and gave a brief report on his activities as the Region H, as the Woodlands Water Agency representative on Region H Planning Committee. Reported that I had received a request from the REMAX of the Woodlands Realtors to make a presentation to their monthly meeting regarding the press release from U of H and that had to do with subsidence in and around Montgomery County and Harris County. I've been asked to speak to the Grogan's Point Resident Association in December. Ed Shackelford's going to join me in that meeting. Probably a lot of questions regarding the same topic, subsidence and drainage. I reported that we had staff attend the Sterling Ridge Village Association activities and the Cochran's Crossing Village Association. Each held an outdoor carnival cook-off event in October on the 23rd, 22nd, and 23rd respectively. We had events there, booths there with the St. Center River Authority. Always happy to participate in those events when we can. We had received a request from one of the trustees to summarize our AMI project. I did put a couple of sheets in your packet. You'll see some yellow highlights. Received some feedback actually from Paul from the original document that went out, wanting a few more, some clarifications and some additional information. So I think what's in your packet is a sheet with some yellow highlights. The yellow highlights are the additions to that document. December 12th, the Audit Finance Committee, SJRA, their financial advisor, and our staff will be meeting to talk about bond financing for the multi-million-dollar improvements that are needed for their critical water infrastructure and how that might impact retail water bills going forward. So we'll be reporting back on that. And then just point out a couple of compliment emails or messages in your packet, one regarding my presentation and another regarding our customer service. So we whizzed through that, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions for Jim?
Yes, Jim, this is one we've talked about, and maybe I didn't make myself clear about it, but on page 80, which is the report from the AMR committee on April 7th of 2020. And the last bullet point says the project cost is 19,877,000 is different. It's higher than the original project estimate of 19,665, which is on the front of your data sheet.
Yeah, and the difference was that the actual contract was lower because the meters, we had been installing meters for a couple of years as they went bad. Rather than putting back our same old meter in, we went ahead and purchased some Neptune better meters. And so that was getting credit for the meters that we had already installed over that year or two period.
Yeah, and that would account for the fact that it didn't change. I mean, the original and then the actuals are the same. And the reason is that those excess were taken out of inventory, which is really, it's a cost.
It was operating cost for the
Operating
MUDs. Yeah, for the MUDs.
Not
That's right.
contract cost. Got it. Okay.
Any other questions for Jim? If not, Paul, the trustees report.
I sure don't have anything more to add.
Okay, any questions for Paul? Number 16, recess. Don't have to. Therefore, we don't have to reconvene. Any items to be placed on a future agenda?
We, a number of MUDs before you have decided to defer their December meetings since December, the meetings this week were the same week as the Christmas holiday. So if something comes up where we feel like you really need to meet, we would call you and contact you. But if not, we would recommend you defer as well.
Okay. Do we have a consensus that it's all right? Unless we need to meet, we can pass on December. Good. I won't be here anyway, so, okay. Okay. So we will pass on December if, unless,
We'll let you know if something comes up where it's needed.
then before we adjourn, especially since this may be our last meeting of the year, and with Thanksgiving coming up next week, I want to thank staff, consultants for all your efforts this year. We've had another successful year, I believe, and I think the board would agree. Every year we have challenges, but staff and consultants have been up to the challenges for the 20 years that I've been here. So we do appreciate that. And we look forward to, a very successful new year in 23. So with that, happy Thanksgiving and
Happy Thanksgiving.
have a blessed holiday season.
Thank you.
And if we don't see you, we'll see you next year.
Bye.